Welcome back to the Business Simple podcast. I have Rico Gomez with me, the owner of Neurofit. I'm pumped for this one. I feel like this might be a little bit confronting for me because I'm not sure how Neurofit I am, but I think we're going to find out. Neurofit is a really cool business. I've done some work with them in the past. When we were thinking about guests for this show, Rico was one of the first people that I thought of, just because I feel like this is something, as we just mentioned off mic, that maybe just in my world, but definitely not just in my world, but maybe more so in my world, there's a lot of trouble around balancing work life, stress, burnout, stuff like that, and coming off the back of what is very much a hustle culture, work until your eyes bleed kind of mentality. It's quite hard to adjust. So I'm really excited to hear some of your thoughts on that. Thanks again for coming in, Matt.
Oh, man, pumped to be here.
Nice.
Let's go.
Hey, man, so can you just run me through, and I did a little bit of research before this, so I have a bit of a feel, but can you just run me through how you wind up running a business like Neurofit?
Yeah. Yes, I can. It wasn't the intention. So, but I think that's where great things come, right? You just fall into it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, doing this one now.
Yeah.
I got into it. So, yeah, 10 years ago, my wife and I, we found ourselves in a season where we both battled depression and chronic anxiety, and she was closer to the suicidal end. I didn't know what the hell anxiety was back then, so I was like, what the hell's wrong with me? Like, this is weird. I'm a performer. Like, you know, I hit goals. I am like, this is out of the blue. So that hit me by surprise, but it didn't come overnight. So like there was like a bit of context, right? So I was in a job that I was like, oh man, like I know where I want to go. And I can climb the ladder, and I was like, let's do it. Like pumped about it. You're young, you're naive. And so I was just saying yes to everything I could say yes to, because it would fast track career progression. But I was saying no to my wife every single day. And so my marriage first year was like a Tuesday night, once a fortnight. And that obviously put a lot of tension on it. And so in that first year of marriage, it was like, you know, a lot of arguments, all this stuff going on. And because I'm a guy, I liked fixing things and didn't know how to fix that. So I buried myself more into work so I can feel more accomplished. However, things got worse at home. And so it got to the point where the divorce topic became a real thing. And I think that was the first shift for me, because I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, I didn't marry my job. I married her. I should learn how to do this thing, because apparently having the title doesn't make you good at it. And so I was like, okay, cool. Let's go down that track. So I then handed my resignation in, and I was like, peace out. I just got to get a 9 to 5, and I'm just going to learn how to do this marriage thing. And went through that the next year thinking that one move was going to solve it all, but it didn't. It made room for everything that was bottled up to now come to the surface, and the second year was worse. And so that year I came home one time and my wife was crying, and she's like, oh, I've been battling suicidal thoughts and I've been seeing a counselor. And that was the beginning of my spiral, because at that moment I was like, it's all your fault, Rico. Like, you're a crap husband. You left what you were good at to fix this. You can't even fix this. You're useless. She wasn't like this before you got married, so it's all your fault. And so guilt and disappointment and shame and blame, like that became my thought process every day. And so, you know, fast forward a couple weeks, and now I'm like, what's the point? I don't want to get up. I'm a failure. Why would I go out there and succeed if I can't even succeed in my own home? And that's the narrative, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that went on for about 1.5 years, and we just continued to spiral together because, you know, validate each other's emotions and all that fun stuff. And so 1.5 years in, I had a conversation with someone that was like the big slap to the face. And he just said, like, Rico, if you got nothing to fight, like, what the heck are you going to win? And I don't know, maybe just being a guy, I was like, yeah, let's go. Like, you know, like, you're right. This is just a battle. I wasn't born this way. Why does the rest of my life have to be this way? And so I then basically jumped into whatever I could get my hands on to figure it out myself. I was like, I want to figure out what's the brain, what's the mind, what are thoughts, what are emotions, how do I hack it so that we can, one, get our life back, I can help my wife, I can help myself. It's just so we can enjoy life again. Long story short, found some stuff, put it into action, And 3.5 weeks later, all depression and chronic anxiety was gone. And from there, I was like, yo, this is different. So then I thought, well, let's see if this works for my wife. And she went through the same process, and she went from suicidal to loving life in 3.5 weeks. No crazy gym routine, no crazy diet change, like just mind management, brain change, body responded. And then from there, my passion for this just went through the roof.
Yeah.
Because I experienced what it was like for everything to be taken away. Like all hope, all expectation, all energy, all purpose. And from that, I was like, life's too flipping short to live without those things. And so, yeah, I mean, I thought I had no like innovation back then. So I was like, oh, just become a counselor now, Rico, or a psychologist. So I went into study psychology, thought I'd become one. And then when I finished, didn't want to be a clinical practitioner. Main reason, not because of what they know, or like they got great tools, but the system itself didn't show brain change. Mm-hmm. And for me, one, it saved our marriage, saved my wife's life, got my life back. That's what I was passionate about. And so from there, I then jumped into just consulting.
Yeah.
So by 2016, I was like, okay, I'm just going to take the tools I know. I'm going to create my own stuff and consult to businesses and show them how you can restructure your brain from this symptom back to health and all that kind of stuff. So did that until COVID. And then once COVID hit, obviously no one wants the contractors in anymore. Good times. And then forced pivot, but best pivot. So from there, I was like, okay, well, let's just go to a direct client approach. So went away from B2B into direct clients. And I sat in lockdown. And I was like, I think it was the first time like we caught up over Zoom in lockdown, right? And I was in that space like, what the heck am I going to do? I didn't want to go direct clients because I was like, one, they demand more and pays less and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I want to stay to the B2B, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah, not right now.
Yeah, not right now. So I'm like, dang. And so I just, bit the bullet and I was like, screw it, Rico. Let's not hide behind your presentations anymore. Like, let's just put what you got to work. And so I drew out a program that I was like, if I worked with an individual, what is the most outrageous result we can get? And so for me, I was like, can we get them results they might get within 10 years with a therapist? Like, let's do that in 7 weeks. Yeah. And I drew on paper what I thought it would look like. And once lockdown finished, I was like, who wants to give this a go? $50 a session, and just to get some test runs on the board. And from there, results started to show, and then I could tweak it to make the results better, and then it stayed consistent. And so then we rebranded to Neurofit and went away from B2B and went full direct client. Yeah. And then we kind of pointed ourselves in the professional development space versus the therapy space to kind of get rid of the stigma. It got us into working with crusaders, and once we got working with athletes, we saw performance increase, which was never the goal. I never thought it would. I was just like, oh, cool. Like, we just want to get rid of your mess. Yeah. And then we saw performance increase dramatically. And I had a chat with Scott Robertson, and the All Blacks coach now. And he was like, mate, if you're doing this for my players, why can't you do it for me? Like, I need to get my performance on the... And from there, I was like, oh, people want performance.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, they do.
They do.
Yeah.
And so from there, I was like, all right, let's kind of shift Neurofit towards like, man, we get results. And that kind of helped us with our own point in the market, whereas in therapy, you can't promise a result that much. Whereas because we put ourselves in professional development, and then we had a product that was so not normal to professional development, it was like, oh, no one's really going here. And then we're seeing performance increase dramatically as a byproduct. And so we just hopped on that, and then companies were like, oh, well, if you're working with them, you need to work with us. Yeah. We want performance too. Yep. And so, it's kind of like how I fell into Neurofit. And now we kind of have a few different products that's based on commercial, and then different products and offerings based on direct clients.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And so how much of the stuff you do is still, and sorry if I haven't followed this correctly, but is still based around that, like depression and anxiety, like the work around that stuff, and how much of it is the performance? Are they the same?
They're the same.
Yeah,
so
right.
and now what we look at is performance. So I think we do like to put things in boxes, right? But end of the day, you're a human being, and one impacts the other.
Yeah.
And so
For sure it does. Because
Yeah,
I'm gonna ask you to critique the way that I manage it.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of the listener. I'm not gonna enjoy it, but yeah,
I'm gonna
for
out
sure
you
it does.
today, James.
Yeah.
No, it's good. So with performance, we often look at performance, and then we can think of leadership and mental skills. So we look at productivity, compartmentalization. We look at things like positive affirmations and energy management, and that's cool. The only thing is you're doing that to keep the pain down. And then if you look at what if the pain wasn't there and you didn't have to do those things to keep it down, all of a sudden those things take your performance to a whole different level because you're not doing it to cover something else. So for example, we had, so I'll share this one because his testimony is on our website, but Ethan Blackadder is a Crusader, and he came to us 2022 or 2021, and his whole thing was mate, I hate making mistakes. Yeah. The moment I make mistakes, oh man, inner critic goes high, crap. And every time I come to a game, it triggers me to, okay, don't make a mistake now. Only do what coach says. And so that's a performance issue from a coach's standpoint. From our standpoint, we got to ask, why the heck do you have that thought in the first place? Mm-hmm. Why are you so pressured to make everyone around you not judge you and keep So we dive into that, and that's where the pain comes in, because there's guilt and there's rejection and there's fear. So we dive into that, we restructure all that. 4 weeks later, he's at a game, side of the field in Australia, and he has this overwhelming feeling of, man, I'm pumped to fail right now. And he goes, I've never had that thought feeling ever, but all I want to do was just go out there, get something to go, and who cares? Yeah. I spoke to Jace Ryan a couple weeks later, and he's like, best game he ever played. And then he got selected for the All Blacks 2 weeks later. After that, we looked at we didn't touch the game and performance once. We just touched the things that prevented you from performing at your best.
Yeah, right.
And then he didn't have to use a whole bunch of breathing techniques to get rid of distraction and pain. He could just go and do what he loves. Yeah. And so, for now, we have so many different people in terms of I want to perform, but I don't know why I can't, or I can't switch off, all the way through to, hey, I tried to commit suicide 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And either one, we know that once they go through the process, they will be, if you're at the bottom of the cliff, they'll be at the top of the cliff, ready to run. If you're already at the top of the cliff, they'll be way further away from the cliff, and they'll be running the other way. Right. Basically. So, it works on different aspects, if that makes sense.
Sure. So I'll just for the sake of, if someone is a listener right now that maybe has a situation or something that's kind of similar to mine, I think a lot, which is sort of how I've managed to balance my own mental health stuff, right? Mm. I view it probably a little bit different than is widely accepted. So I don't think that necessarily feeling bad sometimes is a bad thing. Yep. And I think that that's really helped me. Once I ticked over that. I'm I am anxious right now for a reason. Yeah. And that's okay, right? Yeah. Before, I was just anxious all the time. And so the way that I've managed that, and I've had depression, and I've done a lot of counseling, and I've done a whole lot of stuff like that, and I've really committed to becoming more mentally strong, I would say the word is, and I've treated it like that, and also being able to get up and above my feelings sometimes so that I can manage them. The problem that I have is that I treat the symptom. Because and so this business is a result of me validating myself to myself, for sure, right? Without a shadow of a doubt. And I mean, at the start, it was a result of days where I made sales, I was happier than days where I didn't. Yeah. So a lot more days became days where I made sales than days that weren't, and I became obsessed with selling because when I was selling, I felt good. And when I wasn't selling, I felt really shit. Yep. And so there was no middle ground that was reasonable. It was a swing. And then I went through a period of, it was a really low period actually. I was probably 2 years into having Digital Simple. And that led to me doing a challenge called 75 Hard.
Yep.
And so then that helped me make a connection between fitness, water, things like that,
Yep.
and the way that educating myself
Yes.
in some of the phases you wind up doing, like visualization, you do cold water exposure, you do things like that, which are symptom treating and will cause a really dramatic change in the way that someone who's quite down and out feels over
Yep.
a really short period of time. So I went
Yeah,
from
yeah.
like 97 kilos, pretty fucking depressed, like
Yeah.
had just ruined a relationship because I would rather sit in the office and just drink whiskey until 10 p.m. than go home and
gotcha.
be with them. Like really, really bad place to I'm 77 kilos. Like I think I lost 18.9 kilos
Yeah,
over
crazy.
75 days or something, right? I'm fit as a motherfucker.
Yeah.
I've got abs back. I feel good all the time. I'm like walking into rooms and I'm like, there's like this overwhelming forwards momentum feel that is surrounding me. And I'm like, this thing that I've got that I've like managed to bottle up and control, how do I have this forever? Like that was essentially what I was trying to figure out, because as you'll know with anything like the symptoms thing, it'd be the same with someone who treats it by drinking heaps on the weekend, right?
100%.
That they have to drink more each time to get the same kick from it, which is where, and you know, some stuff like that is stuff that I've gone wrong with in the past. But basically, 75 Hard is such a stupidly dramatic version of doing all of that stuff that you get this crash course where you go from I hadn't cooked in 3 months to I've cooked every meal for 75 days. I'm healthy. I'm fit. Everyone around me is going, man, you look fucking good. Like you, and I'm talking and I'm selling more and all this, and it's all building. And so now I think I'm in a little bit more of a comfortable spot. But I still can't, if I don't have these symptom treating things.
Yeah.
So like if I can't go to the gym for 3 weeks because I have to support my partner because we've got a newborn at home, and we'll talk about the kid thing later on because I'm really interested in your thoughts around that.
Yeah, let's go.
I start to deteriorate. And I know I start to deteriorate, but I don't know how to fix it without the gym.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, all right, okay, so I'll make sure I try to like meditate, but I'm not very good at staying in a rhythm of that. And all of a sudden now, like I've gone on this downward spiral, and I just had a whole day went by and I just drank 800 mils of water. I haven't worked out in 4 days. I slept for 5 hours last night. Max, like I've got a newborn at home, but max, all this stuff is happening. And then this thing that I've always had, that's always there, starts to creep back in, which is like this anxiety, depression, things like that. At the same time, I'm an emotional like pillar for my partner who's going through postpartum, which would be one of the most challenging things that you ever see a person do. And so how the fuck do you balance all that? Like that's essentially, and I'm not asking for you to fix me in this room, right? There will be someone who's listening to this who will do some of the things that I'm doing, but they'll be stuck in the same cycle with all of that.
100%. So, we should have a chat after this, Jake. So, masking the symptoms. Okay, think of this, right? You picture a tree. Okay, a tree that grows fruit. The fruits are your symptoms, right? So there could be overthinking, overanalyzing, perfectionism, anxiety, fear, worry, insomnia, like all that kind of stuff, guilt.
Is it okay if I have all of them?
Sweet. You got to realize that the symptom's not the issue.
Yeah.
The symptom often comes as a protection. Like I got to do this so that the real issue doesn't show itself. So perfectionism stops me from making a mistake, because making a mistake could lead to potential failure. Failure could lead to and then I get to this place where I'm like, that's the thing I never wanted. Crap.
Yeah.
So I have to upkeep these symptoms. But then symptoms people see and they have things to say, and they're like, oh mate, you should just stop saying yes to certain things because you're just becoming a yes man or a people pleaser, all that kind of stuff. And so then we try and take fruits off. Or we start mastering, we do the gym, and the gym makes you feel instantly better. So you're taking a fruit off the tree. Hard part is that fruit's coming back because the tree's still there. And so then we have to keep doing all these things to maintain symptoms. For us, we use the symptom to find the root.
Yeah.
And then we just renovate the heck out of the root.
So do you think, here's another, because I got asked to speak on this thing, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, and I definitely think that you know a lot more about this than me, right? There are parts of my challenges with my own mental health and things like that I've gone through. And I won't be too specific because it doesn't really add to the conversation at all. But I've had some really challenging points in my life with this stuff. Do you think that some of the symptoms that I may have developed might be, or at least my mentality towards it is that some of the symptoms that I've developed as a result of those challenges I've had are actually really positive? The symptoms themselves have made me a better person. And so in that, it's not all bad.
Yeah, that's the big misconception.
Right, okay.
Because one, it can get great results.
Yeah.
You know, perfectionism makes you perform at a certain level, you in high standards, all those things. They often, like, they get you results and then people like to validate the result. And so then we think, well, if I give this symptom up, crap, I will lose out on the approval or the validation. I'll lose out on my performance. Will I become a lazy person? Mm-hmm. The honest truth is no, you won't, because work ethic is just ingrained into everybody. But your symptom itself, like you said, you always need a greater hit.
Yeah.
You know, and so because the hit covers it. I'll give you an example. I had a client, right? Client is a super, super high performer, like great business, athlete, like no tomorrow. But when he was early 20s, he had an injury and he couldn't train or perform in a sport for about 18 months. Mm-hmm. And he went off the rails for 18 months. Drugs, alcohol, just everything, right? And the moment he could train is the moment all the drugs stopped. But in those 18 months, everyone was like, oh, what the hell's wrong with you? How can you be doing this, man? And then when it stopped and he got back into athletics, everyone's like, wow, you've turned your life around so good. But the pain that got him there is still there.
Yeah.
And therefore, he's at a place now where he's like, I actually should be giving up athletics because I'm way past I'm not in my prime. I should be retiring. I should be spending more time with the family, but I'm scared.
Yeah.
Because the moment I give that up, oh crap, could I relapse into what was and hurt the people I love the most? What we're looking at now is, now that the pain's not there, you got nothing to cover anymore, which means you can actually do everything you want out of love versus out of fear of what could or couldn't happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the hard part is with age, your mechanisms will fade. You know, when I'm 80, I can't be training the way I'm training now. And on that journey, you'll probably end up hurting people because you're like, well, the people are stopping me from feeling good. So screw you, I got to go do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had to have this conversation with my fiance where I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do because, like, I'm, and this is being reasonably vulnerable, but like, I come here, I have 20 people that rely on me, right? Like, and if I don't do my thing, like, I'm how they pay for their mortgage, I'm how they eat, I'm how all those sorts of things. And at home, you rely on me, and Archie relies on me because you need me, right? And I don't really buy into so much that like I'm the provider, so I have no emotional responsibility to my family bullshit that the generation before us did. So I'm like, I need to help as much as I can whenever I can. I'm not saying I'm gonna stay up all night with Archie every night. I'm gonna do all those sorts, but like I want to be a part of this. I don't want to be for sure. But then with those two things that I'm doing, there's no room for me to look after myself.
No.
And if I can't look after myself, I actually can't perform in either of those two categories. Yep. And so now I'm at the risk of not doing anything right. And so it was probably one of the more freeing conversations that we've ever had throughout the whole time relationship. I was like, I need you to tell me what you think I should do because you can see this from the outside in. And I can't because I'm too deep in it.
Yeah.
But I know that I have stuff that I have to achieve. Yeah. But I was also like, I'm wired towards this trying to be worth $100 million and be massive and stuff like that. And like, maybe it's worth us having a conversation around, is that necessary?
Yeah.
Is that what you want? And I'm like, what's important to you? And Jen's like, what's important to me is having a big family. And I'm like, right, okay. So with having a big family, there's going to be some responsibilities that need to be checked off from a resource perspective because they've got to all go to school and eat food and do stuff like that, right? Like we can't ignore that completely, but your priority isn't that. And my priority is definitely still to accumulate a level of freedom, but I don't know if that, and like it sent me down this big thing. But since then, I've felt a lot better.
Yes.
Like, because I was like, oh, we're kind of on the same page, and like I can reference it. And we sort of talked. She's like, you probably train a little bit much for someone who's just, you know, and I took maybe 3 or 4 weeks off training after Archie was born. But she's like, do you need to do 10 sessions a week?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, like I can't. And she's like, you know, like I'm like, she's like,
I can just picture this conversation. It's too good.
And I'm like, well, no, because let's be real here. Like, I'm not going to the UFC, right?
Yes.
So do I need to train?
Yes, unless it becomes your goal, mate. Like, you know.
But like, it's a little late. It's a little late, right?
Yes,
like,
you know,
and I'm like, I'm a realist enough to be like, okay, so that's probably not how the story ends, right?
Yes, 100%.
And so I'm like, okay, so that's then cool. So then what am I training for? And I'm like, well, actually, I was never training for the UFC. I was training for the way that it makes me feel. And so then what's my minimum possible input look like for that training so that I can then still achieve the things around it to a reasonable level? And like, that's kind of as far as I've gotten.
Yes.
And so like, Jen's been in Auckland this week, so I've trained fucking heaps, for example, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, is that the answer? Or like, is that healthy? Because I'm chasing the kick. It's the same with the sales thing. Is it's like every time the deal needs to be bigger to feel the way that I want to feel. And I remember signing some of our big clients early days in this like ecstatic feeling. And you know, I've done a couple of deals in the last few weeks that are really big and felt nothing. But I don't feel like I necessarily need that feeling so much anymore. It's shifted more to like seeing my staff succeed and my clients succeed, and that's kind of where I get my kick from.
Yes. Is that healthy, was the question.
Yeah.
Is that healthy? I think from some people's point of view, yes, it is, because you're doing so much. From my point of view, no, it's not, because my point of view is what gets longevity. You know, like, if longevity is not the goal, then that's all good. But for me, I'm like, longevity is the goal. Like, how long do I want to make an impact? How long do I want this relationship to last? How long, you know? And then the goal then becomes, okay, if I want longevity, masking of symptoms is not going to get me there. Not having the symptom is probably going to get me there.
Yeah, right.
If that makes sense. Because, you know, like, oh, I got nothing to cover anymore. And all of a sudden, when you have that, now you have nothing, you don't have a pain to cover with approval or validation or acceptance of some sort. You are validated in who you are. You are feeling good in who you are. So I don't need to get value from someone else. And when you're at that point, now you can live a life of priority versus balance. And I think today the big misconception is like, oh, work-life balance, you got to have this everything balanced. And I'm like, that's impossible, because life is not the same every season, right? I think every season there's times like I've got to say no to this to say yes to that. We know as a business owner, you got to do that. It's in life. So therefore, I've got to be willing to drop the ball on this. But if I'm scared with how my body's going to respond if I do drop the ball on this, I'm not in a position to prioritize. I'm constantly looking at how can I maintain everything at the same time, and that's just never going to happen, or it's not going to last long.
Yeah, right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, which is probably where, say, like a 75 hard or something like that can be helpful for
your 75 days.
But then it's a little bit, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, especially the first time I've probably done it 2 or 3 times, maybe 3.5. It was, you know, I know the halves don't count in it, but like one where it was like 68 days I was through or something, and I forgot a photo or something stupid like that. But that I've taken things from it that I think are good. But there's stuff from it that I think maybe I've formed some habits where instead of now being the guy that drinks 5 days a week and eats heaps of shit food, I've still got a vice. It's just a vice that's kind of widely deemed as being healthy.
Yeah, and socially acceptable.
Because of that, it's socially acceptable. Yeah. Because of that, it's actually worse than that. Yeah. Because of that, people aspire to be like it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and
100%.
so, and like, it's the same with the business thing. It's like, people say, I want to do what you do. And I'm like, you don't want what's in my head.
Yeah.
Like, I know you don't. I know you don't.
You want what you can see from a distance, mate.
You don't want it. You don't
Yeah.
fucking want it. And I know that you don't have it, because if you had it, you would be doing what I'm doing, because you would be so desperately trying to run away from this fucking thing that you have no choice but to like seek these things out.
100%.
And these things are like high dopamine exercises.
man.
Like, we're not talking like little, like, oh yeah, like I can't gamble, for example. Like, I can't do it, because I'll start. I basically went sober, right? Because I had like a alcohol. It was like pushing problem,
Yes.
right? And I stopped dating because
Yes.
I had a problem with that for a period as well. Like, we're talking like real hectic fixes. So through that period of time, I started playing poker, because I was like, what the fuck else have I got? I started drinking a lot of coffee and playing poker.
Yeah.
So then before I know it, I'm like just gambling. Like, that was what I
Yeah.
did all the time. And it was small money, because I'm smart enough to not fuck my business up over it. But like, I got out of that before it became big money, because it's the same thing anyway. It's like, you chase the high, you
100%.
do, you know. I still gamble in the same amount of money as I did when I used to go to the casino 5 years ago. So I'm like smart enough, maybe a little bit more sometimes, but I'm smart enough that that hasn't blown out. But like, I haven't for 4 or 5 months gone to a casino on purpose, because it'll go from, you know, I'll visit once a month to 4 times a week real fast.
Yes.
It's this is what I mean with the like. You
That's
don't
the
want
thing
it.
is, I think like what you're talking about, like the dopamine kicks, right? Because it's an addictive behavioral cycle.
Mm-hmm.
How addictive behavior cycle works is that we're all made to be addicted to things. Like, your brain thrives off what's easy. It's easy to be addicted, so it makes less energy. The only thing is, you're either addicted out of pain or you're addicted out of love. When you like, for example, if you're generous, you release serotonin. Serotonin is the chemical that makes you feel good about who you are. If you do something like an achievement, you've released dopamine. Dopamine is a sense of pleasure. It covers whatever's going on. That's the most common toxic addiction, which is based on dopamine. So right now, we're running after that because of pain. But we often don't know how to fix the pain, or don't know how to get to where the pain really is. Mm-hmm. What we see now, like, easy example, man, like we've just had a guy, or this year we had a guy that came through. He was diagnosed by a few psychologists around. He's just an addictive. He's just an addict. Mm-hmm. He's abused drugs. He's abused sex. He's abused all this stuff. But what they gave him to fix it was behavioral change. Well, let's get some boundaries in place. Let's just get some accountability in place. But it didn't solve the pain of why he went there in the first place. He went through our program. He went through our one-on-one program twice. And he is probably my miracle client. I've never seen a person go from full-blown narcissist to a person that's literally like saying no to alcohol, saying no to drugs, saying just like feeling guilt, choosing to process it. Like, he's just out the gate. Mm-hmm. And now looking, I'm like, I didn't tell you to do all those behaviors, but you're just doing it out of who you are now. It's not to cover anything. Mm-hmm. It's not to please anybody. And I think that's the game changer, is when you can get rid of internal turmoil. You don't have to keep up a lifestyle to feel zero.
Yeah, right.
You know, like,
because that is, and this is the thing that I learned about nicotine, which is, like, you can imagine with my personality, like, that's been a present part of my life for the last, I don't know. And currently I actually haven't had one today. I'm doing really well today. Currently I'm on those Zins. Like, I pop because I can't handle the inhaling of shit, because then I do sport and I feel like shit because I can't breathe properly.
Yeah.
But what I realized with nicotine is that you're chasing zero. And if you didn't have the nicotine in the first place, you would just be at zero. So like, people are like, I smoke because it relaxes me. Yeah. And it's like, no, you're jacked up because you haven't had nicotine. And then when you have it, you feel 0, and the next time you have it, you feel -3, but you're coming from a -30 to a -3,
100%.
and the next time you get to a -6,
Yeah.
and throughout the day you progressively decline. Then you
For
wake
sure.
up at kind of like that first hit of nicotine takes you back to a 0, and then you
Yep.
just go through that process day in, day out.
Yeah.
And I got so frustrated with nicotine that I was like, nah. And I brought it back in out of weakness, actually, to be completely transparent. Post Arch, when I was just like,
Yes.
I need a thing.
Something.
Don't want to start drinking. I can't get
Yes.
into the gym. I don't want to go back to having like 7 coffees a day because I know that's not going to help my sleep, and I
100%.
need my sleep. And so it was just seemed like the lowest
Yeah,
damage
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But man, I had something else to say that I thought was really interesting. I think it'll probably come back to me. But yeah, I mean, this is an interesting conversation.
100% it is.
Yeah, it's because there's so much in it where like you justify it to yourself, but it's so funny to think about it now in hindsight, probably having someone knowledgeable to bounce it off, where you go, like I said, I did a lot of counseling. Like I went and
Yes.
saw someone every week for like probably 18 months, 2 years,
Yeah,
the same
yeah, gotcha.
person. But I never got to hear with that conversation. They helped me talk about some things, but
Yes.
I was, but I never got to hear. And so it's just interesting to try to think. Like
Yeah.
in my head, I've genuinely thought, and I still will live and die by the sword in terms of like me having challenges with this has not been all bad in
Yep.
terms of the outcome. I'm not saying it's had 100%. As a matter of
Yeah, yeah,
fact, even if I learned that I was completely wrong up until this point, I would not go back and change
No, it's
anything
part of
about
your
it.
story, man.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's what actually gives you what you do today of value. The moment you find freedom in an area is the moment you have something to help someone else with, right?
Yeah.
So you can't take that away. And that's the beauty of it. I think now it's just getting to the point where you are, how do you say? It's not the pursuit of what you can get anymore. It moves to the pursuit of the value that you can just give without needing to get anything back. And that is a level of freedom that most people just can't think of,
Yeah, right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, I know. Yeah, mate, you got to do our program, mate. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. Well, we were talking before this. I've got your mastermind event with David Mouse.
Yes.
Shout out to David Mouse as
There
well.
you go.
And we were talking about it afterwards. So I'm looking forward to that. That's in not long. And I think he's putting together a group of people that I was probably going to be a part of anyway. But this conversation is definitely reaffirming that. It sounds like it could be a really interesting process to go through.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm always keen to be better.
There's no
I'm always
doubt in
keen to
that.
be better. So, I remember what that set was, right? And I want your opinion on this because this blew my mind. So, and I may butcher this slightly, but everything I say, the numbers and stuff, they'll be generally pursuant with what I'm saying. So, in the Vietnam War, there was a huge uptake of American soldiers in the Vietnam War using heroin. Right?
Yeah.
That was it. Heroin has a lifetime 10% recovery rate. This is where we slide into the generally pursuant, like it might be 12, it might be 8. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's give or take 10% of heroin addicts recover, 90% die of something that's related to heroin, right? Of the American soldiers that fought in Vietnam and used heroin, they had a 90% recovery rate. And what they put it down to was they put it down to the change in environment as they went from that, like the habits and the addiction that they had created was to do with being in this space and when they changed spaces. But what you said that triggered me is you talked about taking the pain away and that being a really big part of changing that addictive process. And so I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. Do you think it's an environmental thing? Do you think it's because their buddies weren't getting blown to bits?
I think there's a lot to it, right? So the environment is always going to trigger something. So like triggers are always environmental. Pain is often what you would associate to discomfort that you're feeling on the inside but don't know why. You know, why do I feel like I'm agitated right now? And then you can often manipulate the environment, which means this person takes heroin or this person achieves at a really high level. You manipulate the environment to cover that agitation you might feel right now. Obviously, in the type of environment like a war, there's not many options. To cover pain, and there's no one telling you, "Hey, mate, let's go do a Neurofit program." Wow. So there's pain that you got to cover fast in order to perform. Then you add an environment that no longer accepts the way that you're covering your pain. So you move back home, and now it affects the family, and now it affects, so it's the classic atomic habits, right? You want to make a change in your life, surround yourself with the people that the change is their norm. So it's like, oh, cool, like who you hang around. So then that's going to force you to look in a different direction to cover that pain, that agitation. Okay, cool, I'll become sports driven. I will get into business. I'll become a workaholic, which is probably more acceptable than that. And so then we'll class it as, oh, cool, you overcame the heroin addiction, but not so much dealt with your stuff.
Yeah, right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, we can go deep into this one, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the classic around like addiction today. There's so many avenues to do behavioral change, like, boundaries and those things. The behavioral change becomes so much easier when you're not being pulled to cover something.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, if the pain's gone, your behavior doesn't have to be drastic.
Yeah, right.
Because there's nothing pulling you anymore.
So essentially, like, just helping me to kind of get my head around what you're saying. It's basically, rather than being driven into the gym by this, like, running away from not feeling adequate feeling.
Yeah.
If you felt adequate to begin with, and then you just consciously decided that you wanted to be more healthy, you could just go and have a really healthy, functional relationship with the gym and just go because you want to and you enjoy it. Which is not my relationship with it really at all.
Yeah.
I do enjoy it, but you kind of get my gist.
It comes out of this of like, oh, now I will live a lifestyle based on the purpose I've given myself.
Yeah, right.
It's almost like, well, I don't. It's not that the feeling of inadequacy and imposter syndrome is gone. Now I got a mission.
Yeah.
The mission is my family and this business. Great. Now what do I need to put in my life that's going to equip me to do my mission to the best of my ability? Well, it doesn't mean I got to be at the gym at 7 a.m. because at the 7 a.m. I'm probably in my green zone for my mental energy. So that's not going to serve my mission. Maybe I'm going to go 3 times a week because I'm not trying to be an athlete. I'm just going to keep physically healthy to handle the load of what my mission requires. Yeah. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah, I follow completely.
It just checked because now it's like, oh, hold on, how can I make that work for me versus be my source of life?
Yeah, wow.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, really interesting. So obviously, and I mean, we could probably sit here and just talk about the product and things like that forever. But obviously, you're now going off and doing this as a business, right?
Yeah.
And you've been doing that for the last 6 years. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So how is that? How is going out and trying to tell the story? Yeah.
The business journey. Yeah, man, it was interesting, and I think one thing I learned was your first idea is never your best idea. But you start your first idea to get to the one that works. Yeah. And so the journey itself, I think once we created the first Neurofit program, my main focus was classic, niche down, who's my audience, and then can I replicate this product for my audience. And so that was like my first thing. So I said no to all B2B essentially, and just went hard on finding the people where are my people hanging out. There's the classic marketing stuff, right? Like find where they hang out, go and that's where you got to be. And so I did that, and then that allowed us to build the product to, I think once we got to 2021, I was like, this works. Yeah. And then 2022, I was like, great. We're going to go into professional development. We're going to market it in that way. We're going to make this, make our results unattainable by anyone in the mental health space. So that whole year was like research, refine. We're not adding on new product yet. We're just going hard to make this our baseline of like our results. That's probably better than anyone else in the country is our norm. That's where we start from. Yeah. And that became our 2021. And then that opened a lot of doors after that. And so then I think since then it's kind of been like, great, like there's people, we know this can work for pretty much everyone that's willing to do work, but not everyone wants to hear the same message or wants it put in the same way. So then it's like, okay, cool. How do I talk to, mum that's barely hanging on, and how do I talk to multi-billion-dollar CEO that doesn't want to hear about what mum wants to hear about? And so that's kind of been the journey so far of like, okay, cool, there's more traction here, let's hone in the voice there, let's hone in the product there. Okay, well, these people are thinking of this. Is that our mission right now, or is that in the future thing? So it's all, that's kind of been like the journey, if that makes sense.
It does. And so where and like this is just out of curiosity, so where are things at? Like, do you have staff now? Are you working out of a space? How have you grown in that way?
So we've got a space on Peterborough Street, and it's basically, we've got 5, we call it a team, but they are just like part-time contractors. And so they're in the office every day. They run their own businesses, and I mean, Aussie owns Synergy, and Neurofit owns part of Synergy as well. So it's kind of like skin in the game with all of us, and then we all kind of cross over, help each other out on certain things. Their biggest passion is what Neurofit's doing. And so they, like James and Aussie, we've been building them to like, how do you facilitate our group programs now, so I can focus more on like higher level clients that wants to do one-on-ones and really get some long-term results, and we'll do a different program there. And so that's kind of how we got my dad's on board as our marriage coach. So we kind of it's already been a big thing this year with a lot of clients going through, and they're like, okay, cool, what the hell do I do with my marriage now? And then their wife would come and their wife would do the same process, and she's like, oh, okay, cool, I want to build a marriage. Like, what's next? And I've never been able to say, yes, go to this place, because there's not much out there that gets some results. And so I was like, screw it. Dad and mum, they've been doing marriage coaching for a long time, just, under the radar. So I was like, hey, we can create a program together. Can you be our marriage coach? And then I send couples to you after they've done the Neurofit program. And so, he does that with us now as well. So that's kind of how the team dynamics work. And then we run another business called the Social Club. James runs that full time with Melissa, and they also contract back to Neurofit, and Neurofit does stuff for the Social Club. So it's kind of, which we all use the Neurofit hub to do, basically.
Cool. And then what's next for you in your mind in terms of scale and stuff like that? Is it more contractors? Are you planning on doing staff? What are you thinking?
I definitely, well, this is the thing is, right now, this year has probably been like grow, and now we're trying to rebuild in terms of like, the classic runways, right? So just like a good financial stability to then invest more into staff. If I could, like, dream result is that that'll all just be the Neurofit team, and Neurofit's outworking all these other projects. Like, that's the ultimate. I've learned a lot this year around people in terms of bringing them on board and just making some decisions based on their skill set versus their character, and have to, that.
Welcome.
So, so that's when like, oh, damn it, good to know, So, but that's so helpful for me, and so it's definitely slowing the process down on who I bring on, and then what I need them to do. Because it's so ingrained in me on what I do, I have the the classic, like, it's normal for you, so surely it's normal for everyone. And then they get in, it's not their norm at all. So so that's really when the hard part is. But I think moving forward, man, it's a team that runs cohorts up and down the country. It's I'd love to just literally be commercial only. And then be able to refer into Neurofit personal stuff. So
I've got a polarizing thing for you to consider, and we don't need to work through this too far, but it's just because and this has solely come from a mistake that I've made. Right? And I talked about this in the last episode. If I were to go back and I were to do things over, I would solve some things first. I wouldn't be trying to replicate myself. Because you can't. You can't. And you actually don't want to. That's the other thing too. Because if you replicate yourself, you get another person with all the deficiencies that you've got. And no one's making up the deficiencies, right? But I would imagine, just guessing, that you're currently admin, coordinator, bookkeeper, accountant, blah, blah, like your facilitator,
Yeah.
your marketing specialist, your all these things for the business. And so what people naturally tend to gravitate towards is they want to find someone that can do the dollar productive tasks because it's easier to justify taking that employee on, right? I would like to pose the opposite as something for you to consider, which is that what you need is not that.
Yeah, it's getting someone to do the low dollar activities or zero
Admin.
producing.
How can you never check your emails again?
Yeah.
How can you not run your calendar? How can you then, so like we're, and this is the reason why I'm doing this, and I explained this in the last episode, is basically I'm playing on level 5 of this game, but I haven't sorted level 1. Because I decided to be for the people and give Michaela, who was essentially running my life, was exceptionally good at it. I sort of gave her back to the business to help out in operations because we needed some support there.
Yes.
And I'm so generous and wise, so I decided to just work a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And it was a terrible mistake, right? So I don't have admin sorted. Like I'm my own scheduling most of the time, my own emails, things like that, which is completely fucking unreasonable and does not work at all. And so then the quality drops. And so if I were to go back, I would, and like I grew the business to 15 staff with no operational support and no administration support, right?
Yeah,
like I had an accounts person at that point, which was good because invoicing needs to be accurate, but I had no other support from an administration perspective, right? The accounts person was part-time. So I'm running 15 people on my own, plus doing client management, plus doing all this. It was absolute carnage. So I think like a 20-hour-a-week admin, and I know these people are really easy to find because we just chucked a job ad up on Monday, and we are flooded with sick applicants, and it might cost you, I don't know, $600 a week or something like that. But because you're no longer in your emails or anything like that, you just freed up 10 hours of your time. And if you can do that, and in that 10 hours, you can go and deal with commercial, which is what you really love doing. That person's paid for a bunch of times over. So
100%.
And it's lower commitment and less scary and all that sort of stuff as well, which is really helpful. But yeah.
It's a fair point, man.
Yeah. The staff thing's interesting. Like it is something that I'm really passionate about and I love because being a part of seeing your people grow and develop is really special.
Yes.
And seeing a business start to run without you being involved in it day by day.
Yes.
And like there's that like, and I'll never forget this exact moment, but like the first time someone paid Digital Simple money and I hadn't, like someone else ran the ad that generated the lead, someone else met with them, someone else signed them, someone else onboarded them, someone else set the campaign up, and the money turned up in my account and I did not know who they were. Like I didn't know who the business was that had paid, and I was like, nah. Like that, you know what I mean? Like you're like, that didn't. Like
that's a moment.
Nah.
Yeah, 100%.
Nah. And you see that and you become like a little bit obsessed with it. Like I see, and I believe is when you're running a business.
Yeah.
That is, I think, the marker. I think it's self-employed up until that point. And I think you can be self-employed with 10 staff. Because if you're involved in everything, you 100%. Just have a high-paying job that's extremely stressful. You probably deal with these people all the time because they feel like their heads are about to explode.
Yes.
And I know exactly how that feels, but that's the point where you're like, oh, this is a thing that has 100%. Value. It runs 100%. Without me, and
yeah, man, it's good food for thought.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, cool.
100%.
So I suppose probably one thing just on is you're obviously and you mentioned your wife a lot at the start. You guys have a kid as well.
Yeah, 2 kids.
2 kids. Yeah, and so you're juggling creating an entire product segment that doesn't really exist, or challenging, even maybe you're disrupting an industry in a really dramatic way. You're not doing something 1% different to how it's been done previously. It's 99, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You're obviously committed to being a husband because you've spoken a lot about your wife and the way that you guys and you know the changes you've been willing to make in the name of that.
Yes.
I'd imagine you treat being a father in the exact same fashion.
Yeah.
How are you balancing all of that stuff together?
Yeah, great question. One, I lost the need to hustle. Yeah. That's probably one big thing of like, hold on, like it doesn't have to take hustle to provide value. And now looking at like what are high value tasks and what are high dollar tasks, and am I just doing that, and am I okay not doing everything else for a bit? Roll with it. And that's given me the ability to be like, cool, my high value activities is my family. And so I have like, I'm real strict on like I'm home at 5, you know, and I have a big routine once I get home to fully just clock off from work stuff, and like, sweet, I've got 3 hours now with my kids before it's bedtime. So clock in. Because if you don't, that's, well, you screw them up, because I got to deal with people where these parents screwed up. So and I think my job definitely gives me like really good hindsight of where my kids could end up, because we're gonna dive into everybody's past. And you're like, oh, so that's why you fear this, because your dad didn't do that. And that's why we have this problem, because mum was super analytical and everything you did. Now you're filled with guilt. Well, okay, let's talk to my wife when I get home. You know, like, and so that's been super helpful to be like, okay, what is our roles like when it comes to parenting? Like, I want to be the best dad to my kids, and I want to be the best husband, and that's all before a good business owner. My business should definitely serve my biggest priorities, and so I do that. At the same time, I do know I've got a mission to add into the workplace. How I view it is, if my home is super supportive, I will go out and get it done in the marketplace. Like, if I leave and my wife's like, babe, smash it today. You best believe I'm going to smash it today. You know, like, and so I'm always like, okay, well, if I don't have that, well, it's always going to be on my mind while I'm in the marketplace. Because I'm like, my wife's not in the greatest places right now. Oh, man, you know, and then you're not able to perform. And so I'm always like, well, okay, let's make that's the foundation, so that I can go out there and be supported by my family. And you know, with the parenting stuff, man, like, I need clarity and understanding of what my role really is, because I don't like just being aimless. And so when the kids came along, I was like, all right, what the heck is the role of dad here?
Because you're pretty useless at points, and you don't want to be. But you are pretty useless 100%. At points.
Especially in different scenes when you're like, cool, baby doesn't even know I exist, really. You know, like...
because you don't feed it.
100% you don't. And so there's just those, and I think being on the right page. So in the year where we struggled with our marriage, I did a lot of like study on like what makes a great marriage, what's the role here, how do you make this work, and all that kind of stuff. And it just came down to the fact that, hold on, your job is not to make your wife happy, it's to love her. How the heck do I love her? And then that's been the journey, because, you know, love languages are your base. And how do I serve her in that? All that kind of stuff. And so once I knew that, I was like, my job is to fill your love tank. If I can't take a withdrawal. I can't be like, sorry, I'm out tonight, because that love tank is empty. So therefore, I got to keep that up. For my wife, quality time is always going to be the thing. So therefore, I can't work late.
Sure.
Because then I'm going to take more withdrawals than deposits. So there's that kind of viewpoint. With kids, I always got to know I'm a husband first, then I was a father. So I was like, all right, cool. I come home, I greet my wife. Hey, babe, how's your day? And I was always going to be like, oh my gosh, kids are crazy, take the kids. But she knows that I've seen her. So I'll, like, those small routines. And then once I do that, I now know there's 3 big things that your children need on a psychological aspect from a dad that they are not going to always receive at a deep level from mum. Dad is the provider, naturally. Doesn't mean mum can't provide, but what it does mean is that if mum spends 50 hours a week providing, it deprives them of nurture and comfort, which is what they do need from mum. And so therefore, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, they're not going to want to receive nurture and comfort as much from me versus from mum. So provide, and then protector, you are not just physical but emotionally protecting. You're not outing them, you're not laughing in them embarrassing them, like you're just you're providing the safe place. It also means you're the disciplinarian.
Yeah.
And so for me, I know like if I don't set the expectation of what is expected in this house, my wife is forced to, but they're always going to push the boundaries of mum. If I don't set expectations, then we are not disciplinarians, we are punishers. You know, like, what? Don't do that. You know you don't do that. And then they're like, what the hell did I do?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm always like, okay, cool. He did that wrong. I'm the first person. I've got to be in there. Hey, in this house, that's not what we do.
Yeah.
Next time when we do that, this will be the consequence. And then mum can follow up with that because she's there through the day. And then the other biggest thing is provider of identity. Kids will naturally gather identity from dad and mum. Mum can definitely say, I'm so proud of you, you're good enough. But when dad says it, it's a different ballgame.
Yeah, right. That's interesting.
You know, and so for me, I know that when I get home at 5:30, I've got 2.5 hours to provide identity. And if I don't do that intentionally, they will get it elsewhere.
Right.
And that screws them up later on. And so, yeah, but what it does is it makes my role very simple. I got 3 things.
Yeah, that makes it sound really easy. Yeah. I don't know if it's probably that easy in practicality.
Yeah,
but
then you got to live out the simple life. But, you know, like, but I think that's the best part is once you know it, you're like, all right, let's go. Oh, did I step into my wife's zone there?
Yeah.
All right, let's bring it back. Let's get back on the same page and let's go again. Yeah, and then I think with that, I've got simple things that helps me to be a great husband for my wife. And during the day, I'll have like 3 times a week a reminder sporadically to text Hannah now. You know, and in that moment, I'm like, you know, as a guy, when you're in the zone, you're not thinking about anything else. You're just going hard.
Yeah.
But the moment that reminder goes on, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about you right now. And I'll just go, hey babe, miss you, pumped to get home.
Yeah.
And it means the world to her. It was a 10-second thing for me.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm like, all right, easy. Like I can systemize things when I know it's not going to be natural. You know, and I'm not the best communicator at home when it comes to emotions. And so she's like, oh, you always go quiet in your head. I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was doing it. Okay. Yeah. And so then we started a system where I was like, once the kids go down, we have 10 minutes of just, how you doing? What do you need? And now that system allows us to have constant communication, and it started with a 2-hour blowout, but now it's 10 minutes and it's more positive than negative, you know, but that consistency of small systems helps me to be like, communication key, you know, like, so there's little things like that, but I think it's only because I prioritize it as a thing.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Does for sure. And a lot of the stuff that you like for Jen and me, she'll want to communicate and like I have no, you know, like if I have a problem, I just internalize it. Like I don't need support. Yeah. She needs support. And so then she's like, I just need support. And I'm like, the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to fucking do that. Like, what do you, like, I'm like, you could ask.
What the heck is support?
No, like genuinely. Like, and this is something that we've had to work through over the last little bit, where she's like, all I need is to feel supported. And I'm like, I do not physically know how to do that. Yeah, like, and that's frustrating for her. For sure. But that's why we have to work with it. But like, this is not like a I can't be fucked thing. It's not like, I physically don't know how. And it's because I don't really care whether I get it or not. Yes. And maybe and I won't go too far into it because I don't want to bring anyone else that's outside of my circumstance into it. Yes. But like, maybe it's upbringing, maybe it's something like that. But like, I'm like, why would you need someone to tell you you're doing a good job? And she's like, what? And I'm like, no, like seriously, like what is that considered? You find it funny. I had to fucking learn this on the fly while we had a newborn. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I just want you to tell me I'm doing a good job. I'm like, what for?
Man. What for? Oh man, I can just imagine these conversations happening. This is
and
gold.
like anyway. But I'm getting better.
Yeah, good.
Because I'm consciously trying to. And I actually, I think some of what you just said there probably helped me understand a few things I didn't fully understand before. Yep. So that's really, that will impact things. But like, those are real conversations I was having. And she's like, I just, you know, like communication's really important to me. Yeah, man. Like, communication's not important to me at all.
Yeah,
I
right.
just don't care. I just don't care. I have no consideration of like I don't need Jen to turn around to me and be like, "You're doing a really good job. I appreciate what you're doing." I mean, every now and again, I'll come home in fucking pieces,
Yeah.
and she'll be like, "Hey, you get it sorted," and I'm like, "Yeah, that actually maybe helped like 3% from how I
Yes.
feel." But really, what I want to do is just go like sit in a room and figure it out, and I don't need that support base. And so then trying to like manage that with them and doing it in an environment where you're really tired because of the newborn, it's interesting, eh?
I think that's it. Like your level of like her level of support could be giving you the space to go in a room and do that. Because often when you don't, like, you can feel guilty for wanting to go and process.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a big thing. That's the stuff that we've got to communicate more about. Of like, I need to do that to process, and not the same way you do it. How can we help set each other up?
Yeah.
To be like, Dad's just doing that, or I'm just, and so I think that's a good level of communication. I think when we look at it like, man, communication breaks up relationships, but it's only because we don't know what the hell we're supposed to communicate about.
Yeah. I was going to say probably that's every relationship that breaks up, right? Because you look at, and it's like what you mentioned with the symptoms versus the cause thing before, where it's like people put the relationship breaking up down to a symptom.
Yeah.
But it's not that, it's the cause.
No.
And so it's like expectations not being met somewhere,
100%.
Needs not being fulfilled,
Yeah.
and like those are all sorts of stuff. And that is usually probably the cause of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's and we look at like, it's comms, it's money, it's sex.
Yeah.
3 big things. I always encourage people. I'm like, look, how much you communicate to each other about finances is how much you should be communicating to each other about sex.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't, you are definitely not on the same page.
Yeah.
And that causes more hurt later on. And so I tell my clients, I'm like, mate, Friday night sex talk. Doesn't mean you go have sex, which means you have some talk about sex. And they're like, oh, that's weird. I'm like, you're not going to say it's weird after. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
So here's another one then that's interesting for you is so in our dynamic, I may be wrong about this, but whenever I talk to Jen about finances, I'm conscious of the fact that like I deal with telephone numbers because of the way that this is, right? And like Jen can hold her own, like she's super capable, right? But like she doesn't see telephone numbers when she does things, and she doesn't make a mistake and lose 50 grand, or she doesn't run super tight for a payroll and be like, I need fucking $30,000 tomorrow for this, or she doesn't. And so I kind of view part of my obligation, and I know that this is the case with her because we've spoken about it, because I'm actually better at this shit than I probably give off, but I'm just really conscious of my incompetence in certain areas. But I'll notice that I'm like, if I'm like, hey, things are going to just be like a touch tighter over the next little bit. So like if there's anything sort of big that you want to do, can you just like give me a bit of notice around how it might work and some of that? Because like we've got an investment property we're building, a house we're building, I got all this shit going. I'm like, can we be real? And then she'll like message me and she'll be like, oh, well, I didn't buy this thing at the supermarket because I was, you said things are going to be tight for the next little bit. And I'm like, you fucking misunderstood me. Like, I'm not talking about $12 problems here. Like, like we're talking like, and so like we kind of have sort of got into a point where she's just like, can you just tell me if I need to act differently? And if I don't talk to me about it at all, because I don't want to know. Yeah. And if you can just fix it, fix it without, like, she's not really interested. She wants to go be a mum and like do her shit, and she wants a house, but outside that, she doesn't really care for much. So it's a funny one where it's like, we don't, and maybe this is a bit of a weird scenario because of what I do and the caliber I do it at, but like, we just don't really do the finance talk thing anymore, because it actually causes her more harm than it causes me. Because I can be like, if I don't find that 30 grand in 2 weeks, I'm fucked, and I can still sleep because I've been there 100 times before. She can't, and so that I think is where it's different.
Yeah, I get that. I think my wife and I are similar because she doesn't care about the nitty gritty of numbers. One, she's not focused on building a business. Yeah, same thing. I want to be a mum. So our finance talk is always around like, what are the dreams we're trying to achieve together? Yeah. What's the future look like? Okay. And then that gives, okay, so that's how we're going to manage our budget moving forward. We're doing this. Oh, that's what, like, for example, we're like, the start of this year, we were like, oh man, like, what do we want our life to look like in 5 years' time?
Yeah.
That's a finance talk. Because now we're going to talk about things that all require money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so we're like, oh man, like, she's like, I want my family home for the kids, for our friends to come around. I'm like, oh, awesome. Okay. I'm like, I want my M2 in the garage, and I want to do up a car with Romeo. I'm like, that's what I want. And I want to be going on a holiday 3 times a year with you overseas and the family. And we're like, okay. So I guess next year looks a bit different.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you got to do some shit.
You got to do some, yeah. And so then our holidays for this year went from overseas to Hamner. But
it is what it is.
It gave reason for why.
Yeah.
Versus, we're just tight.
Yeah.
And so I think, having those conversations and viewing them as they are money conversations, but it's not putting dollar to a figure. You can do that outside of the conversation.
Yeah.
It's just making her view that she's in it.
Yeah, right.
Kind of thing.
And that was, to be fair, like when I talked about like what's actually important to you, because like we're a team now and we're in this forever. And
Yes.
so I'm like, I'm trying to go out and build the biggest agency that New Zealand, probably Australasia's ever seen, and I'm trying to do all this stuff, and I'm trying to take over the fucking world. And maybe there's a chance that doesn't align with what you want. And so if I go out and pursue that ruthlessly and I don't consider you in the process, we're both going to get hurt really badly
100%.
along the way. And she was just like, I just want a big family.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, okay. So let's be real here then. Like we want a big family, but like it's also important to both of us that we give them opportunities that maybe we didn't have when we were coming up. And so that might look like better schooling, or it might look like helping them to buy their first property, or it might look like doing things like that, right? So I'm like, in order to do that, we need a base level of resources that we're going to have to accumulate.
Yes.
And if we just sit back and chill, they're not just going to turn up by themselves.
Yep.
And then I also draw a heap of pleasure from building a business, like actual healthy pleasure, not
For sure.
tackling emotional trauma,
Yes.
but like actual healthy pleasure. So I'm like, I want to do this business shit.
Yeah,
like,
100%.
And I think that's where you can kind of start to find a little bit of a happier balance.
Yeah, 100%, because you can see how what you're doing serves the family.
And it's funny, like, it's been easier to talk about work since that conversation.
Yeah,
Who would have
cool.
thought communicating might help? It's a crazy
Who would have thought?
concept. Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's true. It's true.
So I've got a couple of other questions.
Yes,
and to be fair, these are probably a little bit easier for you to answer than some of the stuff that I put to you before.
Yep.
Because I've gone completely off script.
Yeah,
and I've
it is.
it did go as well as I expected it to, and I appreciate how you've handled it. So you are essentially, and this is something that I really couldn't get my head around when I thought about this episode and what your life must be like. Because you're selling to people, I believe, that don't realize they have a problem. Yeah. And so what does your process look like to kind of like, where are you fitting education in?
Yeah.
What does your sales process look like? How's that all working to make that work?
Yeah. Okay. Where do I start with this one? I'll get to the sales process. Educating. Yeah. So when I started everything, I knew that the classic Sabi Subri, 97% of the market is not ready to make a purchase. And so then I went all into education. Cool. I'm going to educate and not sell. And I'm going to allow the trust to form the transaction.
Yeah.
And so I went hard in terms of networking groups. I went to like my LinkedIn strategy was literally like, I'm going to connect with 30 people in Christchurch a day, and then out of that 30 there will be maybe like on LinkedIn a high turnover, probably like 25 accepted, and then I'm going to DM 25 and start the conversation, and out of that conversation 10 of them would lead to a coffee catch up, and I would repeat and rinse every single day. And I think for about 4 or 5 months I would see maybe 30 people at a cafe a month.
Yeah.
And not to sell, but to educate.
Yeah.
And so went super organic versus like educate through like videos.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then they took it to the people that needed it ASAP.
Yeah.
And so then it came with credibility of someone they can trust versus just this person they don't know. And so that's kind of how we started. And then from there, my education went from across a coffee table to platforms. And so I would I would educate, like I would run an event, or I'd be at another workplace, or I'd run, like speak at a conference or something. And I would work a lot harder on my ability to communicate effectively, so that people could look at, oh wow, nothing compares to that on stage. So it's like literally I was like, oh man, like you can put me next to Nigel Ladder in the mental health space and you'll pick me. And it was kind of like, so I became so obsessed with communication versus the product. And then I could literally, and because the stuff that we're talking about is real for everyone, I just had to find a way to communicate in a way that would be relevant. And so from there, I would be guaranteed clients after every talk or workshop that I would do. A client would come through, I need to do this right now. And so that's kind of got us through. Now, up until now, we haven't really done marketing. So I think it's like next year is probably our big turn in like, okay, we have the ability to hold a lot more with the systems that we have. Let's see if we can break the system, which means we got to put more on the funnel. So we go hard, but up until now, it's literally been like, we've educated to see, hey, you have a problem. There's hope because it's a solution that you haven't tried yet. And it's also proven credible by the people that has results. And so, for the last 2 years, it's just been referral based, and I haven't really done much outreach.
Yeah, cool.
Really.
Well, I mean, LinkedIn outreach, but then you've been building out a base network that then causes the referral.
Yeah, so I haven't. Yeah, because I haven't really I'm like in the last 2 years, I haven't gone out to DM people. Myself. It's now coming this way. Cool. I think only because of people's results.
Yeah, and that's a special moment. Like I remember that point for me too, where you go like, oh, maybe people know us.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm like, how do you know us?
Yeah. Like,
they're like, oh, my auntie from such and such. And I'm like, cool. Who knows who that person is?
Yeah.
And so, it's been real interesting. Or like, I'll speak at a place and they're like, oh, my husband's coming to you. You're like, great.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we've built it for now. And I think the whole big part is understanding the part of education in the market. It's just showing people that there's something they don't know yet.
Yeah.
And then being able to back it up with the story is what changed the game.
Yeah. Is that your story?
Nah, or my story or another client.
Yeah.
Of
like a real tangible.
Like a real I remember, now we've got so many. So you're like, we're relevant. Yeah. So that's, our sales process has always just been like, man, referral comes through, strategy session. I let you know if we can definitely help you or definitely cannot. And I think people appreciate just the realness of that. And then from there, I let them know the process that's going to take some work. And after the strategy call, it's normally like a 80% to 90% hit rate. Yeah. From there.
Yeah, cool.
And there we go.
Nice. So probably like something that I'm maybe picking up on a little bit from you is that there's a real passion and like obsession from you for what you do.
Yeah.
If someone's listening to this and maybe that in the 9 till 5, or they're a little bit too stuck in like the day by day, I've got to pay the bills or whatever.
Yes.
What would you say to them about jumping out from what they're doing now and going towards the thing they're passionate about?
What would I say? I'll say what I'll probably tell myself. So, man, there's so much I would say. So I would say you can't, you have a frustration. It's your purpose to solve that frustration. Like, don't complain about it. Just solve it. And as you solve it, you're going to grow. The best part about growth is it means you can handle more and more pressure or more impact right? And so if you're battling right now, like, oh, should I step out? Yeah, just know you won't grow without failure. So fail as fast as you possibly can, so that you can see what the real problem is, and then get on to solving the real problem. It's not easy. Like you said it, like, people want what we have. No, they don't.
No, they don't.
You know? So it is not easy. And you just got to be real with the fact of, like, oh, cool. You know, biggie smalls, more money, more problems. So it is what it is. Every level of pressure, or every level of impact you want to make, comes a greater level of pressure with it, you know. But if you want the impact so bad, you will be willing to do the growth to get there. And if you're passionate about it, fail as fast as you can and see what you feel like when people say something about it.
Yeah. I had a really interesting, and I've actually spoken about this on the podcast before, but it's probably worth adding some context to it that you've just helped me to realize, because it was, when I talked about it on the podcast, I didn't really understand it. So what basically happened was, I was out at Lincoln Uni talking to them. I always try to, as much as I can, with like the young enterprise scheme, or like the business class. So I love going and doing that shit. I love talking to kids and seeing their fucking eyes light up when they're like, because I'm not that much older than them a lot of the time, you know, like they might be 21 and I'm like 27. I'm like, that's not that far. So I'm out talking at this class. It was a really small class, and this kid's like, so why would he basically presented me his business concept, and I challenged on a few things, and then he was like, not like constructively, was just like, what do you think about this, and how would you do this, and what's your plan for marketing, etc. And then he's like, I think after hearing you talk about your business and what you do, I should just start an SMMA, was what he called it, which is like social media marketing agency. I didn't even know what that abbreviation was before this conversation. And he's like, what do you think about me going and doing that? And I was like, well, you'd have to compete against me, was my initial response, right? Yeah. And I think when I say that out loud, it probably comes across in a way where it's like from a place of like arrogance or something like that almost. But it's really not. Like it's just like I know how much I need this shit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I think the fact that you're sitting in this class and like you're pretty content with like just learning and doing some things like that, you're probably in the more driven end of the class. I couldn't even go to university, and I knew I couldn't go to university because it just didn't do the stuff for me. And I couldn't even finish high school. I couldn't even. So I'm like, I just don't. And I think that's probably the thing I've just realized is when I say something like that, or when my brain jumps to that, it's not even in from a position of like, because I'm better than you. It's probably the flip. It's like, you aren't damaged enough to come, you know, like you don't have the things you're running away from. Man. I'm going to do your program. I'm really interested to see what my brain works like when it's not trying to run away from stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, like, there's so much you can tell someone, right? But I think without having context of who they are, how they come across, it's very hard, because it's not a one size fits all. Yeah. You know, everyone has a journey that you got to go on. At the end of the day, you just got to be willing to do the growth, and growth is growing pains. Yeah. But I have the thing that drove me was, I mean, someone talked about like the graveyard being the most valuable place on the earth, because everything that should have been birthed, a business, a song, a book, it's sitting there. And I was like, that ain't never happening to me. Yeah. So from that, I was like, nah, whatever is in me, I'm getting out, because it's selfish if I don't. Yeah.
Do you know what else will also rock your mindset dramatically? And once again, I'm not great at remembering like specific numbers or anything like that, but I read or watched a video, I believe it was, on a study that they did on people's regrets on their deathbeds.
Oh, yeah.
And the overarching, and I believe it was 80-something% of people responded something along the lines of like, did not spend enough time with family, did not spend enough time with wife, did not do things like that. And it was like sub 1% were talking about like a business deal or a transaction or something like that they missed. And that made me think a little bit, because I'm like, you know, like the thing that you do, or the thing that we do in terms of this like business pursuit and trying to grow a company and build something, no matter whether your drive is passion or purpose or economic or what it is, takes a lot. and that includes time.
Yeah.
And it would just be awful, I think, to get all the way to the end, or like to have a final moment and then be like, man, I wish I hung out with Archie more. And that be the thing that I'm thinking
100%.
about. And so trying to hedge your bets against that stuff is interesting.
Yeah. Well, sorry, as you're saying, what came to me was what I would now tell somebody if they were to start is that your idea, so this sounds real harsh, your idea probably sucks.
No, it definitely sucks. Yeah.
Definitely sucks, because the idea you should not build pride in.
Yeah.
What you should do is you should go and talk to everybody that you have access to that's doing it, and listen to their story, and allow that story to give you a perspective of what you're going to walk into. At the same time, like, put your pride to the side so that you can build a network. Mm-hmm. Like, you cannot do anything without people. And so therefore, for me, I'm always like, everything changed once I caught up with somebody and they shared a story where they almost got it, but they failed.
Yeah.
And then they didn't get bogged down from it. For me, that was the game changer. I was like, tomorrow I'm starting.
Failure was a big thing for you, early in the piece.
Yeah, 100%. I was so scared.
Yeah.
But that comes back to like my story. I grew up in South Africa. As a person of color, you were so picked apart on, like, through the apartheid time. Like, you make sure there's no room for someone to pick something wrong of you.
Yeah, right.
That was the way of survival. And so if someone said I could do it, then I would go all in. And so if I think I'm not going to achieve, then it was like, oh, that's not for me then. And so I was so afraid of failure. Whereas now I'm like, no, like, it's part of growth. Yeah. But I think until you hear somebody's story and you just build a network. That's my thing.
Yeah.
Just go get people around you, bro.
Just listen.
Just listen.
Yeah.
Be humble and let them guide you and allow, like, even if they give you crap advice, you're going to build a muscle of action versus ideas. Mm-hmm. And that's my thoughts.
Yeah, right. I've got a closing question for you, which is our closing question for everyone that comes on. If you were starting again from scratch, so go all the way back to, pre-Neurofit, you could change one thing, or you would do one thing differently, or you would take one piece of knowledge that you know now with you, or it could really be anything.
Yeah.
What would the one thing that you would take or do
one
be?
thing I would take... oh, man. One thing that I would do differently is... man, one thing I would do differently, there's so many things that's come into my mind right now. I don't want to do it like a crap answer. Bro, I actually don't know. I'm like, man, okay. I think the biggest thing I give people now is that, like, on a business standpoint, find your niche as fast as possible and talk to them, because it will fast track what you are giving, and actually it being taken by the market. That's on a business standpoint. That's what I would do, especially if someone's in a service-based business. That's the
Makes sense.
Go. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's a deliberately super challenging question.
Yeah, it is, man.
And it's also one that I like, and I sort of enjoy asking it each time, because everyone pauses.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, whoa, I know my answer, but that's because I've asked it 15 times now,
it's unfair.
And so
it's
it's unfair, it's cheating. But
because I got so much, I'm like, oh man, personally, this. But like on a practical business sense,
you'd narrow it down, talk to those people.
Like talk to the people you're wanting to serve.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you can't serve them.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
End of the day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, cool, man.
That's it.
Great.
No,
what's next for you?
What's next for us? Our biggest thing right now in terms of Neurofit, like in terms of the next thing I'm focusing on, is probably nailing down what we're doing in the commercial space. Mm-hmm. The last year we've had opportunity to work with some pretty epic companies, but we keep finding ourselves in the workplace well-being space. And the workplace well-being space doesn't serve who we actually work with on a personal or direct client model.
Right, interesting.
The direct client model, we're probably working mostly with leaders to CEOs, if it's like on a one-on-one scale. But once you go into a workplace and you talk workplace well-being, everyone with a leadership title is clocked off.
Yeah.
You know, so for us, we're already coming on the back foot. And so, finding our niche in that space of like, we're probably going down more like emotional intelligence, and then figuring out what is the service that actually does that. And so, we've got a few ideas now that's probably looking at like, how can we actually just build retainers with companies, because up until now it's always been sell per month.
Yeah.
Go get it.
Yeah. Retainers will change your life.
Yeah, which I'm pumped about.
And I don't really talk about it, but like our recurring revenue is the thing that makes me not scared at every moment of every day.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, so I'm pumped about that.
Yeah.
That's right with the next part of like, how do we actually do that well, still give really good results? How does it serve? Yeah.
Cool.
That's what's next.
Sweet, man. And how can someone connect with you? Obviously from a sales perspective, but also just from a following your journey and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, LinkedIn. This thing, I'm not heavy on like socials. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the place I post the most. And if you want to like literally just hop in the DMs and have a chat, I'm open to that. Love that. So yeah, LinkedIn, and then Neurofit's on Insta. Cool. Follow.
Great.
Go do that. Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Chill.
Hey, that was confronting for me probably at points, but really, really enjoyable. I appreciate. As I said, I'll do your thing. I'm in. But I'll go through the little. I'll do in the name of for David and his events. We'll do the mastermind, and then I'll jump on his cohort of what he's trying to do there. I'm keen. Cool. I was probably going to do it anyway, just because I've been following your stuff for a while. But hey, you've sold me for sure over this podcast. And if anyone else is listening,
all I did was educate you, mate.
Yeah. It's funny stuff, eh? But thank you for your time, man.
Thank you for having me.
That. Thank you for being so transparent around your story and giving me space to talk about my stuff and actually helping with me practically as well. It's really interesting. I'm excited for what we can do together. If you're a listener and you've made it all the way to this point, thank you. Obviously, you'll appreciate Rico's time as much as I did. That's been really cool. Thank you for listening to the episode. Make sure you follow us on socials. You can also watch the video if you don't have the video up on Spotify right now, on YouTube, if you want to do that. We'll give Rico some of this content, so he'll be able to post it on his stuff. So make sure you give him a follow as well. Subscribe, do all that sort of stuff, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks again, mate. I really appreciate it.